Scalpel. Forceps. Action.
Action!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the operating room.
This is Cinema Surgeons.
Today's patient is Batman Forever, the third film in the original Batman anthology.
It's a little trickier to talk about as, unlike with the first two and then the last one, nobody has a very common consensus opinion. The common consensus for the first two is that they're good, with the first one being a little bit better, although I respectfully disagree. I'm a big fan of the second one. And then everyone agrees that the one after this, Batman and Robin, is just, we all know. And then there's a lot of opinions on this one, but let's make the incision. So to talk about this film is to talk about the first two. We're going all the way back, starting with Batman 1989. Tim Burton was a relatively unknown director at the time. He didn't really do very many things. So when he was attached to the project, it was a bit of a risk. Same with attaching Michael Keaton. But what do you know? It was a huge success. It was one of the biggest comic book movie successes of all time, especially during that day and age. It was huge. Everyone was raving about it, and it made Batman come back into the public light after, 1960s Batman was a little not on the serious side and certainly didn't paint Batman in a very good light. So this brought the Caped Crusader back, and everyone was all excited, especially the studios at Warner Brothers. So they said, Tim, we loved your last film. Here's a blank check. Do whatever you want with the next one. We got Batman Returns. Although I personally love it because I'm a Tim Burton fan, when you get down to it, it's a very strange film, as it's less of a Batman film and more of a Tim Burton what the heck fest. And that scared the parents, because obviously with characters like the Penguin and Catwoman's portrayal, not as much for kids. I mean, kids could watch the first one, but I certainly wouldn't let my kid watch this one. Not until they're like a teenager or something.
Right.
There was a lot of things in here that scared away parents and scared away advertisers and everything. So they decided, okay, Tim, for your next one, can you winnow it down a bit? So then when Tim Burton was getting ready to submit his idea, they said, on second thought, how about you just be a producer? And so then they got Joel Schumacher, the guy who directed the Wiz movie, and that's a good sign. And they wanted him to make it a lot more lighthearted and a lot more energetic. And they were all ready, except nobody wanted to fund this movie. Everyone was scared because of what happened in Batman Returns. While Batman Returns did do well, it wasn't the master hit they were hoping for. And after whatever the heck went on in that film, a lot of people like McDonald's were scared to advertise or make toys for it. But the film was a big hit at the box office, although critically it was pretty mixed. People seemed to really like it. They loved the lightheartedness, and then of course that paves the way for the next film, but more on that another day. As said, this film was directed by Joel Schumacher, and it was written by a bunch of different people who don't really have that very many recognition. Lee Batchelor, Janet Scott Batchelor as well. I don't know if they have any relation because I can't find any information on them. And Evica Goldsman, but it was produced by Tim Burton. Although Tim Burton had little to no involvement with this, he just got a producer credit. He was doing Big Fish at the time.
So, in Batman Forever, we enter a world where Batman, played by Val Kilmer, saves hostages from Two-Face in an elaborate invention of his, played by Tommy Lee Jones. But in the commotion, Two-Face gets away. Bruce Wayne then goes to Wayne Tech to find Edward Nygma, played by Jim Carrey. And Nygma has an invention that he wants to use to impress Wayne, because he's a Wayne superfan. He wants to impress him and be his friend. But he's too incessant, and Wayne is like, this is a little unethical, so he turns him down. This causes Nygma to just go crazy. And then he ends up killing his boss and pretending that it's a suicide attempt of all things. But it works and he gets away. Then he begins to send riddles to Bruce Wayne, alluding to his sinister alter ego, but we'll get to that later. Bruce then goes to the circus and meets Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman, and they see an act by the Flying Graysons. Long story short, Dick Grayson, or Chris O'Donnell's character, is orphaned by a Two-Face attack, and then Batman takes him in to eventually become Robin. Meanwhile, Edward Nygma becomes the Riddler, and he teams up with Two-Face. He's inspired by Batman and Robin teaming up. They begin to steal things to mass-produce his mind control invention that he was proposing to Bruce. Robin's troubled because he really wants to kill Two-Face, But Batman isn't really about that life, right? Right? The Riddler uses his device to find out who Batman is, and he does. And Batman's almost killed by Two-Face, but Robin swoops in, luckily, and saves Batman at the last minute. After this near-death experience, Batman's like, alright, it's time to give up being the Caped Crusader to be with Chase, for some reason. But the Riddler and Two-Face, they don't take too kindly to retirement announcements. So they shoot Batman and kidnap Chase, but not before leaving a riddle. And, of course, blowing up Wayne Manor. And the Batcave. Wow. Batman dons his cape again because he eats bullets for breakfast, let's be real. And then he and Robin head out to stop the dastardly duo once and for all. Now, Robin gets there first, and he actually defeats Two-Face, even though Batman couldn't. And now he has super Batman morality powers, so he doesn't kill Two-Face. But he does get captured because of this.
It's like Batman Shadow Knight all over again.
When Batman gets there, the Riddler pulls a classic, oh, you can only save one of the hostages scenario between Chase and Robin. But Batman, being Batman, just blows up the Riddler's device, and the Riddler goes crazy because all those ideas are rattling around in his head from the people he stole them from. It's kind of like an internet phishing scam. It's aged a little better now.
Mm-hmm.
Batman saves the day. He saves both of them, but then Two-Face comes out of nowhere and flips his iconic coin. But Batman, being prepared as the Batman should, throws a bunch of coins into the air, and Two-Face is like, oh no, where's my lucky coin? And he stumbles backwards and falls to his death. Then the crew takes the Riddler back to Arkham and begin being Batman and Robin. Oh yeah, and Chase is there too. Not for long.
Yeah, so, how's Batman Forever? As you can tell there, that was a pretty short summary for a 2-hour movie. Want to know why? There's a lot of filler in this. And a lot of scenes just kind of drag. I mean, we get it. The Riddler and Two-Face are evil. You don't have to show us 12 separate scenes of that, basically. A lot of the scenes just linger and go on too long and basically reiterate the same point over and over again. They're redundant.
Right. A lot of the character portrayals aren't necessarily the most accurate to the comic representation of the characters. And this is not to say that it's bad, but it goes so far astray from what's previously been established in this universe. It's a new actor for Batman and all that. It's just, it kind of gets muddled in that Two-Face is a little too wacky, and I feel that's mostly due to direction.
And by too wacky, I mean he's the Joker with Two-Face makeup.
Yeah.
The only reason that he did this, apparently, is that he went up to Jim Carrey and said, I find you annoying, basically. And so he tried to out Jim Carrey. But then Jim Carrey tried to out Jim Carrey, Jim Carrey. You get where this is going. They just kept trying to outdo each other, and then that's what happened. And Joel Schumacher's like, cool, this is funny, let's roll with this. Because I'm going to bring this up later, but Two-Face would have been great if he was played by Tommy Lee Jones, the real Tommy Lee Jones, not whatever this was.
Not Tommy Lee Carey Jones.
And the Riddler, I don't know. I mean, sometimes the Riddler's goofy and weird, but this is both. He tries to be both.
Yeah. He tries to be serious and goofy, and it really...
And I love Jim Carrey, but he is not funny in this. He's trying too hard, I think.
And that might be due to the writing, but it's also a little bit due to execution. I also love Jim Carrey. I think he's done some good work in some movies, and I think both of those actors for the villains were really acting out of their normal range of quality.
And it's not to say that acting out of your comfort zone is not a good thing. It's just the way they did it was not good.
When it affects your quality of acting, you know, you should step back and examine it a little bit.
Then there's also minor ones like Batman is very inconsistent in tone. Robin's just kind of an angsty teen. Chase Meridian, for the very few personality traits she has, is unpleasant, but she amounts to nothing in this movie. We just skimmed over every little bit of her because she amounts to nothing. She has no point. Oh. I mean, there's that little bit of trying to analyze Batman's past, but because that gets no focus, it's entirely pointless. And that leads us to the last and probably the worst part. Much like Click, this has a lot of tonal inconsistencies. Because how originally this was going to be is Tim Burton was going to have the Riddler try to uncover Batman like in this, And Batman was going to struggle with his identity, and that's why he was dating a psychiatrist, because that's such an interesting story. But the way Tim Burton was going to take it was he was going to get really psychological with this.
Right.
This is just superficial and cheap. As it said, Chase Meridian's only interested to do the Batman.
There are quite a few things that we could do to fix this movie. What would you diagnose it as?
I would say another moderate.
Another moderate? I think it's on the higher end of moderate, more severe.
Yes.
Closer to the severity. The fixes, villains, direction of the villains, I think, and maybe even the writing for them, was not the most ideal portrayal of them. They were too goofy, too wacky. I mean, they would have been out of place in the Adam West Batman days.
And the thing is, we've had one goofy and one serious villain before. The Penguin, despite the fact he was menacing and disturbing, had a lot of comedic moments. A lot of people forget that. And it works because it's one serious and one goofy, but when it's just two idiots running around, not only is it annoying, but we can't take them as legitimate threats. It's like if the Box Ghost and the Condiment King teamed up. Ooh, we're all gonna die! Ooh! It's things like that. Now, and the thing is, in the first minute of this movie, like, Tommy Lee Jones' first 2 lines are perfect as Two-Face, and then it just changes. Now, this is a little unethical, but I do recommend a recast for the Riddler. As much as I love Jim Carrey, I think there's someone who could have done the role better. Tim Burton's original pick, Robin Williams. Now, Robin Williams seems like a little bit of a weird choice to play the Riddler, but think about it. If you look at movies where he's really serious, like Dead Poets Society, or even the disgraceful movie that is Patch Adams, which we're hoping to get to that another day at least, he can do serious really well, and he can get kind of really disturbing and kind of mental up in there. And just imagine Robin Williams kind of standing there with his thing questioning Batman's sanity, and with like the booming score and everything. That wouldn't that be so interesting and powerful? And if he does want to have the goofy moments, which the Riddler, even when he's sophisticated, he still does have those moments sometimes.
Right.
Robin Williams could do it, but even with his improvisation, he can be restrained. Jim Carrey is designed to never be restrained. When he's restrained, he's miserable, and it shows. And this is a movie that needs a comedic restraint.
Right.
Someone like Robin Williams who could have done that. And I do think that was an original good idea that Tim Burton had. I think they should have stuck with that. And Robin Williams was interested in doing that. I think he even was about to sign on. I don't know, though. That part's a little muddled in history. We can't really find it that well.
Right. Now, there were what I would call tonal spikes in this movie. It wasn't necessarily that it was fully tonally inconsistent, unless you look at it in the purview of the other movies, because the first 2 were more or less serious films. This one was more wacky.
And this one was supposed to be more serious, too. There were a lot of deleted scenes, and like I said, the original draft that Tim Burton had.
There are moments that pop out, and they're super crazy wackiness, and then they just expect you to take things seriously after that, and you're like, okay.
I mean, it'd be one thing if they already had these tonal spikes, but the fact that there's no transition between them really hurts it, and it takes you out of the mood. It's like, again, with Click, where they wanted you to have both the comedy and the action, but you can't have both. You can't. Even if there's a transition, it's still not going to look very good. And that's the problem with this, is that the wacky parts are distracting from the story, and then the story is just too muddled in with all the wackiness. Another thing, this is a little bit of a smaller issue, but this is a really scaled back sequel. When I hear the term Batman Forever, that sounds big and foreboding, but it's relatively small scale. The first 2 were huge, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. That's how sequels are supposed to be. But this has very few locations. There's no real big spectacles that happen aside from the bat crotches and the flashing lights. So it just feels like a smaller movie despite the massive price tag it had.
Yeah. So
another thing, our last little note, remove the filler. There's a lot of stuff.
Lots of filler.
And there's a lot of scenes that they cut out that should have been put in here. You could have cut out a lot of Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey mugging, and the film would be no different. But a lot of the stuff they cut, you kind of needed.
Right. And I think that it's important, as I said, there are other movies, and this one kind of turned it for the silly. I think if it would have kept in a more serious line with the first 2, it would have been a better film as a whole, and I think keeping Burton as the full-on director would have been a better call.
I think they might have done that just because, like, for producer things, but even still, wouldn't it have made a better product if you just, like, maybe had them team up or something?
Right.
Because obviously when Burton goes too far, we get Batman Returns. As much as I love it, investors didn't. But then when Schumacher goes too far, we get Batman and Robin, and nobody likes that.
Right.
So if they could come in the middle, maybe we could have gotten that original Batman Forever movie that we were going to get. Because I'd actually really like to see that.
I would too. That would be really interesting. And I think that Schumacher has a way of putting a lot of energy into things, and I appreciate that, and I think that Burton's real creative abilities and his ability to make a more serious tone and have funny moments, them working together, the funnier moments could be energized a little more to make them less Burton-esque, because sometimes Burton just gets into a real style niche, which is awesome. But for Batman, it doesn't always work. So yeah, the team-up would have been really good, I agree.
And here's another thing that Schumacher does on his own. With movies like Phantom of the Opera or The Wiz, he puts a lot of effort into how it looks and not so much the writing. For this, the computer effects look kind of dated, but... it's bright and colorful, which Batman shouldn't really be, but for what it is, it does look kind of nice.
Yeah.
And it does have some cool spectacles. And it's definitely clear that they put a lot of work in it. It's clear that that was the priority. Make it look flashy, make it look exciting for kids. And then, of course, every problem we have here comes back in the next one, which we are going to do Batman and Robin just someday later. Because that's another movie that could have been so good.
Right.
Overall, this movie's just fine. But I actually dislike watching this one more than Batman and Robin. A little controversial, I know.
I agree with you on that, actually.
Because Batman and Robin you can have fun with. This is
Right.
frustrating because there's a good movie trying to get out. You can still see remnants of the original piece in here with Batman questioning who he is and trying to take in Robin. But when it just gets suffocated by all the bright flashiness and the mugging and all this stuff, it's so frustrating because you know they almost had it. They were so close, and then they threw it away.
So.
That's why I dislike watching this one the most out of the original four.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
don't dislike it the most as a movie. It's just a less enjoyable movie-going experience. If that makes any sense.
I agree.
Good, it does make sense. I'm right. Take that, Mom! I
So
love you,
with
Mom.
that, we stitch up the patient and send Batman Forever to go with his Batman movie friends.
Yeah. Let's just hope they have a good Thanksgiving when Batman and Robin comes back from his surgery.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, that's gonna be a fun one. Remember to drink lots of paint, but only the blue paint because that tastes like raspberries.
Nope.